Good evening, guys. It is Wednesday, May 7th, 2025. Forgot what month it is. This Bathrobe business. I'm George Yoganov. I got my decaf coffee and I got the news. There wasn't a video yesterday. I had a little dinner with my fiance, so we were out and I couldn't report, but I'm back today. Let's jump into it. Big story of the day is the Fed. Now, really, nothing really happened with the Fed. It pretty much came through exactly as we anticipated. Let me share the story. The Federal Reserve is not cutting interest rates, not raising interest rates. It's holding steady. There is concern of economic stagflation and a rising uncertainty in the market, but so far they're remaining steady. Now, two of the biggest indicators they look at is employment and, of course, inflation. So right now they can't cut because inflation is still high and only getting higher. I should say getting hotter. If they start cutting into this market, it will cause inflation to go up. Simultaneously, we're facing economic headwinds. So they're wanting to cut, but they can't because if they did, it would cause inflation to go up. So that's the problem with stagflation is the fact that they can't, they're between a rock and a hard place. And whatever move they make, they could end up fouling things up. However, jobs have remained incredibly strong, and so has employment. And so because of that, it's probably a better economic climate than it appears. And so because the economic climate is better than it appears, they're going to be holding steady. That's the major takeaway from this article. It's not anything surprising. I think everybody saw this from a mile away because there's no way they would have cut into this environment. And of course, they wouldn't raise because they don't have the stomach for it. So right now, we're just going to play the waiting game. Now, interesting story that kind of relates to this. I always recommend listening to Paul Tudor Jones, hedge fund manager. I've talked about him on this channel before. He's someone that clearly understands the market because he knows that inflation is baked into the market for the next foreseeable future because that's how our government operates nowadays. But in this interview, it's really short and sweet. You actually have to have CNBC Pro to listen to the full interview. But who really does that? I don't think anybody. But in this cool little snippet, he talks about how the stock market is going to go down regardless of what happens with trade. And his argument for that is because of tariffs kind of choking the economy, and at the same time, the Fed unable to cut rates. So regardless of what happens, it's going to cause a downturn in the economy because the Fed can't cut. The Trump administration can't go back on its word. So we're going to see a regress and a shrink in the stock market. Now, that's not necessarily a shrink in the economy per se, right? Because oftentimes what we talk about on this channel is the difference between State Street, or I should say Main Street and Wall Street. So a shrinking economic sector isn't the same thing as a shrinking Dow Jones Industrial Average. So there is potential here that we're going to see a regress and a devaluation of a lot of these assets, but not major effects into the daily lives of people, which to some extent has been the case right now. I say that with a bit of hesitation, but right now, a lot of these tariffs have affected the markets, but they haven't affected employment. They haven't affected wages. They haven't affected spending. Americans are still spending. They're still racking up debt. They're still finding new jobs. They're still getting their wages raised. So all that is still happening, but Wall Street is kind of going on a roller coaster ride. So I think there is something to say that despite whatever happens in the coming months, it will probably be a bigger effect on Wall Street than it will be on Main Street. Now, another interesting thing he said is that Trump tariffs will probably end up being around 50% with China. I think that's a very fair argument simply because if you read The Art of the Deal, which I have not done, but I've heard it covered on multiple sectors, I probably should. Trump is known for what he calls the big ask. So when he goes into a negotiation, he will go in with a request so outlandishly ludicrous that you can't help but deny it. But anything from there becomes more logical. And there is some sense to this. And this, I think, can greatly be exemplified by his political career as well, right? So in his debate with Kamala Harris, he said, they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats. I was recently listening to a podcast on marketing and economics. It's My First Million. I think it's a great podcast. I highly recommend it. And they talked about how at that moment, the person they were interviewing, he's an entrepreneur, he felt that in that moment, Trump won the election because nobody was talking about the migrant crisis, but now all of a sudden they had to defend the migrant crisis. So it doesn't matter if it's true or not. People had to go in and disprove the fact by saying, well, yes, there's lots of migrants in this city in Colorado, but nobody is eating dogs and cats. But now they have to admit to the fact that there are major migrants in major American cities. And that's what led to Trump winning the election, right? He won strongly on immigration issues. And that kind of has been his trend his entire career. So he comes out saying we're going to have 145% tariffs on China, when really it doesn't need to be 145. But now that it's that high, they have to come in and negotiate down. So no matter where he ends up, he still ends up with a victory because he ends up with 100% tariff, 90% tariff, 80% tariff, 50% tariff. But one way or another, he's getting his tariffs. So Trump is kind of known for the big ask. That is one of his negotiating strategies. So that's why I think Paul Tudor Jones is right that the Trump tariffs will probably end up being closer to about 50%. Now, in relation to trade, there's a couple interesting things happening with this as well. So the Trump administration is going to be meeting with Chinese counterparts on trade this weekend. So in Switzerland, Scott Bissett and Jamison Greer, who I do not know who he is, I think he's a representative with the House, U.S. trade representative, are going to be meeting with representatives from the Chinese Communist Party in Switzerland to negotiate trade. Now, this is the first actual meeting and the first real negotiation that's been happening. Now, that is going to be kind of untrue with the next story that comes. But in relation to China, this is the first real negotiation they've entered. I know the Trump administration has been saying that, we've been negotiating, but China keeps coming out and saying, no, we have not. We haven't spoken on anything. Now, they could both be lying. There could be some negotiation, but not to the extent that Trump is saying, and the CCP might just be saying they haven't talked at all to make Trump look bad. But this is an official meeting. So there is going to be something coming out of this. I think we may see not a finalized deal, but a tentative deal being worked out this weekend. Kind of piggybacking off of what I was saying a second ago with the big ask. At the end of the day, Trump wants a deal. So it doesn't really matter if it's everything he wants. If he gets some of what he wants, he considers that a victory. At the same time, Communist China kind of operates at the same kind of model. They don't necessarily do the big ask, but at the end of the day, they believe that anything is better than nothing. They are willing to make sacrifices, but they believe that if they could have a deal and avoid conflict, then it's going to be better for them. So I think we may come out here with a tentative deal being worked out by Monday morning. And if that does happen, you'll probably see a major rise in the stock market. But I don't want to overplay that hand because obviously that could end up being untrue. But I think given where both parties in this negotiation are coming from, I think it's possible to have a tentative deal. Now, kind of the other reason I think that is in relation to this article, Nvidia's Trump administration plans to repeal Biden AI chips restrictions. So Nvidia stock is on the rise because Trump is saying that he's going to get rid of a lot of Biden's regulations. I think partly why he's doing this before the summit is to show China that we're willing to negotiate, that we're willing to lift embargoes and restrictions on global trade of AI chips. Now, this isn't necessarily mean there will be no tariffs on those chips. Those are still going to take place. But part of this is just getting rid of the restrictions that the Biden administration passed on selling AI chips and building AI infrastructure abroad. This would definitely change that drastically. Now, this would to some extent hurt the U.S. because when you had a ban on building data centers outside the U.S., you had to go domestic, and that's why there's been so many big corporations buying up a lot of rural land everywhere. South Dakota I can't remember if it's South Dakota, or North Dakota, are actually booming right now because of that. They have a good energy grid. They have easy access to energy because of natural gas and fracking. And in addition, they have lots and lots of free space where you can build lots of data centers. So this will probably hurt if this truly does get repealed, it will hurt the data center market and a bit of rural America. But obviously, it would greatly bolster companies like Nvidia and AMD who are manufacturing these chips and are looking for markets to sell them to. Now, last story. This is the the first finalized one. So this was just published about 20-30 minutes ago, right before I started the video. Britain is set to become the first country to sign a trade deal with the United States. It's supposed to be reported early tomorrow morning. I do expect the market to rally to some extent with this, but it looks like Britain is the first country to do it ahead of China before the weekend. Now, this is probably the easiest deal to negotiate. This is probably an easier deal to negotiate than Canada or Mexico. For the main reason is that Britain really needs this. Remember, Britain is no longer in Brexit, and it's odd man out. So when it's negotiating entirely by itself. When we go to negotiate with France, when we go to negotiate with Italy, they still have the EU at their backs that have a little bit of weight and a little bit of muscle that they can throw around. The United Kingdom does not. It's completely independent. And this is really a move that it started doing back in 2015 when Brexit began. They began to move out of Europe and looking more towards, the West, towards the United States. In addition, really since the 1980s, the United Kingdom has slowly moved to become a colony of the United States. And I understand the irony of that statement, but there's no way that's not true. We have intelligence officials saying that. We have entire parties just caving to whatever the current administration wants. This has been true for multiple administrations, going back to the Bush administration and 9/11, but even prior to that, going back to the Thatcher administration. Britain is very much under the thumb of the United States. So there's no way this wasn't going to happen. In addition, they're constantly in turmoil right now because they have major crises due to deficits. They are constantly switching governments. They have switched from the Labour Party to the Conservative Party, back to the Labour Party. And in Britain, that's a much bigger deal than just an election. That's the movement of entire governments. And in addition, its wealth is just in terrible shape. Britain was a colony, not a colony, but a state in the United States, it would be the 51st poorest state. The poorest state in the United States, I believe, is Alabama. The United Kingdom is below that as far as poverty level. So they need this more than anything else. They were going to hammer out a deal before any other country, like I said, before Canada or Mexico, because both Canada and Mexico are stronger economically than Britain has become and much less vulnerable. So it makes complete sense that this deal probably will be hammered out very quickly. Now, don't expect a full deal tomorrow, but the framework of a deal and a tariff structure is probably going to be rolled out tomorrow morning. So I think that's definitely going to happen. And one way or another, Britain needs this because they have no alternative. That's pretty much it. Those are the stories of the day. Lots of stories on trade. I hope you guys have a fantastic Thursday. And I'll see you guys back here tomorrow. Bye.